Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for an episode with some of America's premier architectural photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent Zoom meeting of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This discussion is led by AIAP Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
Let me just welcome everyone to this meeting of AIAP, this Zoom meeting. We have a loose agenda today, which is talking about, this was recommended by Norman, who's on the call as well, and which is talking about what's in your case. And we get asked that from time to time, and I think that might be a real interesting discussion. And then the other one is kind of just, let's catch up on what's on your mind. We haven't had a meeting since early summer, and the reason for that was everyone was busy, and I'm grateful for that, and hope that you all are still busy. This has been a good year for most everybody that I've talked to. But let's get started here, and we'll kind of try to resume these monthly meetings like we were doing in the past, and maybe we can stay more in touch with one another and kind of work through some of these problems. I'm inclined to kind of jump off on what Karen was talking about here earlier, and this is, we'll start out on the what's on your mind part of this, and talking about this trend of content versus quality. And since we weren't recording before, Karen, if you could maybe just kind of bring us back up to speed, if you wouldn't mind, as to the dilemma that you described with regard to the architectural firm that you work with.
Right. I did some work for this local architectural firm who I really want to work with because they're growing like crazy. And they haven't hired me since. And I looked at who they're working with, and the guy's photography just really isn't up to snuff, but it seems that they don't care because the guy's probably cheaper than me. And what I was wrestling with and been thinking about a lot lately is quality versus quantity. It definitely seems like everybody just wants quantity over quality. And if you're a quality photographer and you care about what you're putting out, putting out images that don't, you've taken care of the glare, the color correction, you perspective straightened, you got rid of innate elements. Where are we in the market? So if you're not an A and you're not a C, because I think I'm kind of a B plus.
I think you're an A, just so you know.
I'm on your website right now. You're definitely an A.
All right. Well,
you've got a nice style. I like it. It's clean.
Where do I fit in? Where am I going to find the architects that really can see? I'm shocked. This was the other thing. I'm really shocked that architects can't see the difference. Some can, but between what that guy is producing and what I'm producing. So I'm actually going to start, I figured out a whole new marketing campaign. I'm going to send a mailer. I'm working on figuring out how to print it right now to 50 architects. I'm going to really fine tune who I want to work with and see how that goes. Because if this is what this guy's doing, I don't know. I don't want to be a fast food photographer, just banging it out.
And that's
because it's
a good way of sending it out. I'm not a photographer.
Right.
Catch their attention.
I need a tagline.
Well, years ago I did when digital first really kind of came to the forefront here about 15 years ago. I did a mailer, and it made a lot of enemies, but I showed a photograph that looked like what a real estate photographer would do, and then I showed the same. It was actually a residential project, and I showed the same the same project, photographed the way I would photograph it. And my headline was, "What if people judged your projects by the photographs that you use?" and then hyphen. As a matter of fact, they do. And there were a lot of people that jumped on that and decided, yeah, we need to do better. And then there were a lot who said, you know, you're being an elitist jerk and we don't want to work with you. So I think that there's probably a market for the photography that we're willing to do still, but I think it's kind of shrinking. And I think that the larger market is the unskilled. I've watched YouTube videos and have a DSLR and I can do this, or a mirrorless camera, and jump in there, and that seems to be the bulk of the market right now.
Actually, and iPhones.
Yeah.
Right. So Norman, you were going to say something, then I was going to say something after.
Yeah, I'm you know, obviously been doing this a long time. I'm old fashioned, Karen, and I'm fussy about who I work with, and I want to work with somebody that appreciates my work and values my skill, and I don't, you know, I was talking to Ellen. He said it's his busiest year. We've had an amazing year this year. Last year was probably our busiest year ever, but so while I certainly don't want to compete with somebody that you know, is shooting 200 pictures on a job. We don't do that. You don't have time to do that and do a quality job. But I do target clients, and I will call them and I'll set an appointment with them and I'll go see them and I'll show them my work, and my work compared to what they're using now, and they'll see a value in that. And I tell everybody, you know, I'd rather have one good image than 50 bad ones on my website or my social media or whatever. So I think you know, the client you're talking about, the architect, is obviously not your client. They don't appreciate your work. They don't appreciate that skill level. And what they're doing while they might be busy and they might be ballooning right now, that's not going to sustain them. Quality always has a sustaining ability. And when you maintain quality, you know, we only have one level of work here, and that's A+. And I don't do any, if I'm not happy with it, it doesn't get delivered. And there is no compromise with that. And I think if you hold to that, you'll always be busy. And what you'll do is you'll sift through all the clients that aren't worth working with. You know, you really will. There's plenty of high-end clients out there. And I think there's work for everybody. If you do a quality job, and I'm looking at your work right now, and I don't have any suggestions for you. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
You know, I think that client, that architect that you want to work with, I would just fire him. Like Alan said, he's not your client. Look for somebody better. Look for someone that'll appreciate you. If you focus on that, I think you'll be successful, and I think you'll be busy. I never cut my price. I never compromise my quality, and I have always been busy. It works with me.
You don't find when you cold called an architect and you ask them to lunch or whatever that they find it that they're too busy, or I mean, I want to do that, but I feel that then they feel obligated, or you know, they're all of a sudden they have to do something and give you time.
I'm a marketing junkie and a network junkie. I love introducing people to people. I introduce people to other photographers all the time, whether whoever, it doesn't matter. But if I see an architect's work that I really admire and I think I could do a better job than his photographer, that's the guy I'll call. If I'm looking at an architect and he's got beautiful photography, I leave him alone. He's got a good photographer. You know, go find somebody else. I don't want to take someone's work away from him. But if I think I can do a better job and I can be working with me would be beneficial to him, then that's the guy I'll contact. That's the person I'll call. And designers and architects are my favorite people to work with. I mean, it's especially the interior designers, because they really, you know, that's their work. And they'll see a difference between an iPhone shot, and they'll notice when a door looks like a banana, or when you can't see out of a window, or you can't see their drapes or their, you know, their window treatments. That stuff drives them nuts. So that's a good, you know, maybe steer away from the architect a little bit and focus in on a high-end designer. They really appreciate your work. That's the majority of our work, is high-end designers.
So I just want to put in my 2 cents about there was a term, there was a phrase came out about 5 years ago about what's good enough. Okay. And that's where we're coming out of the recession. and the photos just had to, come across to get a certain idea. But now we're getting better quality and so on. But I think as we come into maybe a recession in 23, it might be going back to what's good enough. But I think it depends on the market that you're in. Um, Karen, what market are you in? What city are you in?
I live in Lyme, Connecticut. It's very rural, but there's a lot of wealthy people around here, and they're all having work done, in landscapes, and there's a lot happening here. So I'm like halfway between Providence, Boston, and I guess if you've heard of Fairfield County in Connecticut, like Greenwich, Fairfield, New Haven. So there's a lot around here. I just, I don't know. For me, this, I have no work in July and August.
Well,
So
you're in a smaller market, and you're always going to have these lower cost photographers come in. Well, the quality is not as good, and so your clients will be bombarded with this, and then they're going to compare your price with somebody else. Like I said, what's good enough, and that's something we've had to fight over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's always a tough market. You got to build those relationships, and I think the networking is so important because it's like anything else. You might meet with 10 people, not necessarily lunch, but just on the phone or showing your portfolio. But it's just that 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20 that will keep you busy.
Yeah, Karen, that's really good thought. And I travel too, so not everybody travels, and because I do travel for my clients, not everybody does that. That's probably a good 30% of our work is travel. In some instances, like last year, it was probably 60 or 70% of my work was travel. So I'm in the Chicago market. I have an intense. The competition here is very intense. There's plenty of work for everybody, and if you have the ability to travel, particularly in the Boston area, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I
I
would.
travel. I would for sure.
Yeah, I think you've got the ability to expand your market a little bit there. 80% of my work is travel. I only do maybe 20% of my work here in my local geographic area. But before we got on this call and started recording, Norman and I were chatting, and we have both raised our rates this year. And I know for me anyway, what happened was my business picked up. I increased business. I raised my rates by 25%. And all of a sudden it opened up this new market of higher end clients who I'm thinking maybe he looked at my rates before and thought, well, maybe he's not the best that we need because his rates are at this certain level. I don't know. But that was something that was a real surprise to me, was that my business picked up after my rates went up. So
yeah, I've actually, that's an excellent thought. I've actually lost a client. I remember 10 years ago, I quoted a job against another Chicago photographer. And I remember the designer, and I really wanted to work with them. I still would like to work with them. And he told me, he said he can't be any, effing good at that price. And I'm a way better photographer than the guy that he's using. But that was an impetus for me to jack my price up. And this year, because of our, everybody's costs across the board have gone up 30% on everything. So yeah, we raised our price twice this year.
Yeah, it's definitely not Canada. Up here, there's just no way. Up here is just architecture pricing it's turned into real estate.
Wow.
And they won't pay for travel. My first question whenever they contact me now is, what's your budget and how many images? And usually you hear, well, my budget's just around 1,000 and we're looking for about 50 to 100 images. You can't do that. I just go, no, thank you.
My next question is, what are you smoking?
I know, but there's photographers here. They're doing these projects for like $300. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Processing them. That takes so much time. Even if they just
No, they're send those over. They send those overseas for sure.
They just care that their images are bought. It's a joke. They don't care. They'll spend hours on it. But here I've got a client, and it's all, some of the newer photographers trying to get into the market, but they've wrecked the market.
Oh,
Well, that reminds me of stock photography when it started going into royalty free.
Yeah,
They'd just be happy that something was sold and somebody was using that.
Yeah.
exactly.
There's something I just learned this week. I was talking to one of the marketing firms, A Wonderful Machine, and they were mentioning a photographer in a major city that does real estate at $500 a location, but his majority of his work is high-end photography. But he does this on the side, so to speak, this shooting these houses down there in LA for real estate. I thought that was a tricky one because they find out you're charging that a lower rate for real estate, and then you're going to have your regular day rate for higher end clients. So
Yeah.
real estate is definitely hurting, and I don't think it's going to go away because the quality of some of the software that they're using to process basically overnight, it's pretty impressive. Now the angles are not what we say and what we see, and then also the retouching, but it's bringing us all down with the low rates that they charge. That's the bottom line.
It is. I agree with that. And not only that is you've got the other companies, like some architects here and some construction companies, they'll start, oh, we've got a competition, go in and shoot the building and send us the pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Compete with that.
I never heard that. So you just
That's what they're doing here. Even the city of Calgary, they're doing the same thing. They're going, oh, we just built this, the library, go in and take pictures, and we've got a little competition. Let's see who wins. And they take their pictures. It's crazy.
Yeah, I love what they say, we'll give you photo credit for your own
That's all they say,
intellectual
we'll give you photo
property.
credit.
Who cares,
Yeah.
those
Well,
are
it's
the
like
people you
Getty
say
with-
no to.
Yeah.
Those are the people you say no to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then, and I did. And then, recently that happened with an architect. He closed his doors, and two of the people went to a new firm and they wanted to use the images. I think I wrote about this online on these to get advice. So I told them what the price was, and I said to them, because they're right up the street, I said, and what if you buy these images now, this second license, I will offer you a shoot in the future with 25% off of what you paid for the images to try and get my foot in the door. They don't want the images, which is fine. But either way, I burnt a bridge. But I mean, I don't care. But what I mean is, they were never going to hire me if they didn't get the images for free. And they were never going to hire me if they got the images for free. So it was a catch-22.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think this kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier, Karen, about talking about a targeted list of firms that you'd like to work with. Norman alluded to this as well, and every year I kind of make a list of the firms, and they're big firms and they're successful firms that I would like to do business with, and then I just concentrate on those. And every year I pick up a couple of those. The real estate market is such a different situation than what our primary market really is, as far as architecture. And even though we were looking at a looming recession, there is the fact that housing and multifamily housing and things like that have never been busier. And the firms that are doing that are growing really fast, and they're making a lot of money. And to me, that seems to be the easiest door that's open right now, is for these large firms, design, architecture, and construction firms that are doing multifamily work in large markets. And if it takes travel to get to that, then so be it. But the local construction guy or the single practitioner architect in your local town is probably not going to support you in the long term. So I think we have to refocus who we're looking at and be more targeted about the kinds of firms that will actually buy what we sell.
Yeah, that's great advice. We got a friend that's a shooter in Bend, Oregon, which is kind of a booming area as far as people moving into it, but it's really not a large market. And he's very frustrated with what he has to compete against. And that's it's going to be an uphill battle, and it's probably not going to change. So I would definitely recommend going to a larger market and just focusing on those clients, because over the years it's going to be like, again, so frustrated that you're dealing with the so-called bottom feeders.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I've been reaching out to Providence, Rhode Island, because I'd rather work that direction than Fairfield County, because then I'm not dealing with 95 and all that traffic. But I think in Providence, it feels a little easier for me because of it's a very elitist group in Fairfield and really hard to penetrate that market, actually.
Mhm.
So when I started, just real quick, when I started shooting architecture in '97, I've been shooting since '81 in general, but I want to start shooting more architecture interiors. I sought out a local magazine, Oregon Home Magazine. It was mostly interiors and exteriors, and that's how I really got my foot in the door in the market. So that's what I would recommend. Also, if there's a magazine, I know the magazines are dying, but there's still a few out there that specialize in interiors. I would pursue the magazine because it's great advertising for you. They don't pay a lot, but you get your name out there. So
Yeah, I pitch them all the time, actually.
how's it going?
Right now I'm waiting to hear back on a few, and I do have relationships with magazines. Because I'm also a writer. I've written a lot of articles, but I usually get responses, which is great. So they usually say yes or no. Of course, that's all they can say, or maybe. But the point is that I always get a reply because I have a relationship with them. So I keep trying them whenever I get a good project.
Okay.
I want to work on assignment, of course.
And do you know the other photographers that they're using when you see the credit line? Do you know the shooters?
Yes, I know of them. Yes. And one of them is excellent, and he is all over the place. He's really got it sewn up with almost every single home and garden magazine, national and local.
A lot of things that helps with that, Karen, is if you want to get into press work, is having an agent. Because
yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to mention one other kind of anomaly that is a market that we don't generally go after, and that is a large firm from outside of where your geographic area is, that's doing business where you are. And one of the examples of this is, say, an architectural firm who's doing large resort homes. Let's take Jackson Hole, Wyoming, for an example. They're doing these very expensive homes there, and they're being paid a lot of money by people who don't live there, and they're using a construction firm who may or may not be from there, and they're bringing in a photographer from somewhere else to photograph that. So the local photographers in that area, if I'm using Jackson as an example, are never seeing any of that work.
Wow.
And so the key is to find out who those firms are that are coming in and doing the big expensive projects in these smaller markets. And I know that Calgary is a market that's like that. And I know that
we get a lot of people. Like, I don't only deal with architects and construction companies. I find a lot of my clients, they're engineers, engineering firms.
Yeah, that too. And there's a lot of people that I know from Vancouver that are shooting in Calgary, and from Toronto that are shooting in Calgary. So
I do get those calls. Yeah.
So finding out an engineering news record is a good resource. And if you're just looking at the trade magazines as to what projects are being announced and who's doing those, that's an easy way to get on board. There was a project here in Salt Lake City, which was a shopping mall 10 years ago, and there were virtually no local firms involved in that. It was a several billion-dollar project, and architectural firm from out of state, and construction companies and engineers and all that. I was able to to vet who was actually involved in that, and with the help of my wife, who was working as my rep at the time, get in the door and be the exclusive photographer for that.
Another
Which basically bankrolled my year.
Yeah.
once I got into that project. So that's just an example that, there's a lot of work that's kind of behind the scenes that we're not seeing. Photographers flying in and out of your local area doing work that you're not getting. And if you're competing with the guys that are only working locally, you're not seeing that high-end work. And so it takes just a little bit of investigation and research to find out who the big spenders are that are actually doing work in your area or whatever area you'd like to work in. And I'm convinced that in Karen's situation, that there are some firms that are bringing photographers into your area that you could just as easily be shooting those projects for.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of looking at your, do you have like a construction association in your area?
Well, I belong to the AIA Connecticut, and I'm going on a couple of like walking tours of buildings that are being constructed, and to meet the architects. It's open, so I'm trying to do stuff like that. I have looked at engineering and construction firms, but no, I am going to look at what Alan just said about the engineering news record.
Yeah. A lot of my projects that I've done, they come from the construction companies, but I always go to the example, the Calgary Construction or the Alberta Construction or Canada Construction websites, and they show all the upcoming projects.
Yeah. Architects newspaper is another one.
Yeah, that's another one too.
What is it called?
Architects newspaper. And these are free. You can get a free subscription to them generally. And I go through those when they come. I go through and I will either dog ear or highlight pages or tear pages out if I see somebody that I'm interested in pursuing, and then go from there. And then I throw the rest of the magazine away because I don't care about it. But it's just a source of leads. Yeah.
When you get those or identify those companies, do you look at their websites to determine if they already have a photographer, what the quality level is, and make the assessment kind of like Norman mentioned he does?
No, I don't. I generally don't spend that much time researching it, and I will just contact their marketing people directly and say, I've heard about your project, such and such. I'd be happy to talk to you about photography when the time is right, and leave it at that. And some of them have firm commitments, and I respect that, and others don't. And so I don't really muscle my way in on those kind of situations. I just open the door and let them make the decision.
Well, that's all you can really do.
Yeah. But you at least have to make that contact.
Yeah.
I definitely look at the websites before I contact someone. And some you could tell they haven't done anything in years and years, and they might not even value photography or want to hire you. But then again, I could be wrong. With that. That's a catch-22.
Well, and let me bring up just another point too, and that's when you do shoot a project, I think it's helpful to find out who else is involved in that and spin off those others as potential clients. So
I've done that.
If I get hired by the architect, I want to find out who the contractor and the engineer and the landscaper and the manufacturer for the light fixtures and the flooring and
everybody. You just check out everybody.
Yeah.
And then you just spin it off. Like what I do is I say, okay, I'm capturing this project. Would you like to see the images I capture once they're done? So there's projects I've sold to 5 different companies, the same images. Yeah.
Yeah, I do that regularly. Most of my work, I'm licensing to about 5 people, 5 different parties.
Yeah.
So
generally, Alan, are you bringing the, sorry. Generally, Alan, are you trying to bring those people in the beginning, or are you waiting until you finish the images and then going to try and license the photographs after the fact?
For me, it's when it's after the photo shoot.
Yeah.
I try to find
you have something to show.
Yeah, and what I do is I post a gallery online of the photo shoot, and it has a 7-day expiration period. And I quote them a price for multi-party licensing discounts. It's not cost sharing, it's multi-party licensing. And I offer a discount when there's, more than one party licensing, so they don't get the idea in their mind that they're sharing one cost. But then I offer that for, that preview link is up for a week. And after that, if they haven't made a decision, that's that. And I quote the price is on there, and they have to license the entire portfolio at that point. After that, they can license individual images at my regular prices. That's fine. But having that deadline seems to be a big motivating factor for people to say, yes, I want these, or no, I don't, that kind of thing.
But does the client who hired you, like, I always find it's tricky, even though you own the copyright and you can do that, if you sell them after the fact and he missed out on the potential of cost sharing, is he annoyed that he paid full freight?
I've never had that happen.
What I've done, Carol, in the past is, Karen, I've actually said to construction companies, look, and engineering firms and some architects, I don't work as much with architects as I do with construction companies and engineering firms. I always say, do you have, if you can get a group of people together, I can get you a better price. But of course, I use the second user license and third user license. So I'm still getting all the money, but I give that to them and then they go, oh, that's a great option. We can save money that way. So just grab them. Yeah, that way.
Yeah,
You're still making the same money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't go back and, retroactively rebate money to firms because somebody licensed the images. So it's off the table once that multi-party licensing offer expires.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a similar thing, Alan, but I do it before the shoot. If you want to be a part of that way, I know who I'm working with and who I'm working for. And oftentimes an interior designer want a different image than an architect or a builder.
Yeah.
And so they like to participate, and sometimes they'll come out themselves or they'll request something specifically. But I don't offer multi-party licensing after it's done. I do it prior to that.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about them saying, oh, I want to see the job first. They can look at my website and they'll see the quality of the work they're getting. I mean, that's a representation of what I do. So, and it works out. I have a lot of people do that, but I never do it after the fact.
Yeah, I usually do it after. Now, here's one. I had a company, they hired me from Germany, and there was a big project here, and all they were the elevator people, and they wanted me to capture the elevators. And I go, wow, what a great opportunity. So I went in and, as the company's hiring me, but they want some other pictures, and I just grabbed the whole building. So once I did that, they got their pictures, and then I approached the engineers, the architects, everybody else. They all bought it, the whole packages. So it's just getting your foot in that door and getting the images. I've done a lot of work that way.
And I think we leave a lot of money on the table when we don't do that.
Yeah.
Because, well, what happens is you end up finding out on, if you're signed up with Pixie, you end up finding out a year or two later that somebody's already using those that hasn't licensed them. So,
which is one of our sponsors. You say Pixie, I'm just dealing with it, and they're a sponsor we've had for many years. Yeah.
Yeah, they have been really good to work with us at the AIAP, and
yeah.
Everybody should.
I will be buying a second home because of Pixie. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not signed up with them, I highly recommend that you.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people use your images. It's amazing.
And they are so good at recovery. It's just astounding.
It's staggering.
Yeah. So I've got 500 as of this morning, 549 open cases.
Wow.
Oh, I think that's more than mine. I thought I had the record at 300 and some.
Wow. Yeah, people just assume they can just use the picture. It's just whatever. No.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Is there any other subject that we really ought to jump into as far as what's on your mind here? I think we hit the big one. As far as what the market complexion is right now. I just can't emphasize enough having a targeted list of firms that spend money and going after them. I mean, when I first started out with no clients in about 1991, and my portfolio under my arm of prints, and went to talk to art directors and things like that. It was just a numbers thing. If you called on a certain number of people, you ended up with a certain number of assignments. And so it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
I've always felt just hitting the ground running and beating the path to these other projects and architectural firms, interior designers. There's no substitute for that. And not just emailing, but also making those calls and putting
Yeah.
your face out there too.
Showing up in person, you can't underestimate I mean, people have lost that connection,
Yeah.
we're used to
Yeah.
texting and instant messaging and emailing. That personal connection, they remember that.
Mhm.
And when you meet somebody, like I won't work with a client unless I meet them first. I want to know, because if our personalities, if I think there's a wall there somehow, I don't have time for that. I'll give the name of somebody else. I just don't. I mean, I love what I do, and I don't want to be frustrated doing it. So if I get any inclination that there's that, that something's not going to blend well, I will recommend somebody else for their project. But that personal connection, you can't underestimate that. And Karen, if you haven't been knocking on doors, target 2 or 3 people, and don't expect to get hired immediately, but they'll remember that.
Mhm.
And people will. My business card is a 4x6 picture. I don't use little bitty cards. I use 4x6 pictures. And when they, I've been to offices in the past where they've taken a magnet and actually stuck it on a filing cabinet. I go back 6 months later, it's still there. So I know that that's the person they're going to call. And it's really worked out well. That personal connection is really important.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of business cards, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I put a QR code on my business card this year. I redesigned it, and so on the back of the card is a QR code, and I can't tell you how effective that's been to hand that to people, and immediately they're on my website. So
I signed this up for some digital business card, Alan, where I just touch my phone to somebody else's phone.
Yeah.
I don't have it installed yet, but some client did that with us here at the office, and she was so impressed. So she's getting that set up for us.
Yeah, those are cool too. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, right to the. I mean, right there. Bam.
Yeah, puts you on. But that's been really effective for me this year.
Do you use? Sorry, do you use Vistaprint for your business cards, or do you have a preferred?
I have used Vistaprint. I don't like them very well. I use one called Got Print. And let me just grab my card real quick. I've got them here.
Yeah, why don't we just put a big QR code on the side of our rig, and then people can.
So this is the front of mine, and it's very simple. But I use gotprint.com, and then the back here has the QR code, and it's on 38-point stock, so it's heavy. It's a really heavy, stiff card, and they don't throw it away. I'll hand it to people, and they go, "Wow, that's a big card. That's a heavy card," kind of thing, which is nice. But they immediately scan that, and so. Even if I'm not shooting with them that day or something, I've got them to my website already, and it's just so simple. Flowcode.com is where I generated the code from. That's free. So.
And then do you have to give it to Got Print to put on the card? How do you get it onto the card?
Yeah, you create a PNG or a JPEG
okay.
or whatever. And
Right, right,
then
right.
as you set up the card, I mean, I design these online, and so I just set the card up online and make the order, and it takes them about 10 days. I think they're in California is where they are located. I don't know. But anyway, it's online. And for 500 cards, I pay about $100 for these really heavy 38-point cards. And they've got a little black line in the middle. So it's a three-piece card. So it's white on both sides, and then it's got black in the middle. Anyway, it's been kind of a little extra perk for me this year.
Good.
Let's move on here. We did talk about licensing just a little bit, but I just wanted to bring up one thing before we jump into what's in your case. But hopefully everybody can stay on the call here. But I'm finding that I'm getting a lot of emails from photographers in the organization wanting licensing language to put on their invoices. And I'm going to post what I put together with the help of Pixie just recently. And it's kind of a combination of what we've talked about in previous meetings, but I will post that on the Facebook page, that little blurb. And if you don't have that actually on your invoices somewhere, or your estimates or whatever, I'd recommend that you think about doing that. Because I think that we're going to see infringement just kind of take off from here on out. I mean, it's increasing rapidly every year, and if you don't have that on your invoice, you really don't have the teeth to enforce your copyright with a certain individual who may or may not have shared it with a subcontractor or things like that. So.
So you like to know what ASMP would have in some of their suggestions?
Well, it's very similar to that. I went along. I mean, I had a big long one, and Pixie kind of helped me pare it down slightly. And so it's not real long. It's easy to understand, and it's very to the point about what it is. And there's one for general customers, and then there's one also that they help me generate that is for when you have a property owner that's getting a complimentary set of images. And that happens from time to time, like schools and government agencies, nonprofits, individual homeowners, things like that. And so there's also that that lets them know that these are theirs to use personally, but they may not share them with anyone in a commercial situation, because I've had infringements that have been pretty egregious because the homeowner decided to share things. So,
All right.
Where did you say that you put that information?
I'll put that on the Facebook page.
Oh, okay.
I'll do a post on the Facebook page, so those two blurbs are on there. And you can use and modify them as you wish, but I do know that Pixie thinks that those have got enough teeth in them to be something that we ought to have on every invoice or every delivery, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
every
really
transfer.
important.
Yeah.
A lot of photographers will use like a 5 or 6 page licensing. I've seen them do it. And I mean, by the time you get to page 3, the client is just freaked out.
Yeah.
My license is really simple. It's straightforward. It was put together by an intellectual property counsel, and it has teeth. And I've used it in court successfully. Pixie loves it. It's simple. It's easy. It's I share it with anybody. I share it with everybody. I think I've sent it to Alan, but
Right.
They
But
gotta know what they're buying at a glance. Yeah.
keeping it simple like that it is really important. And I agree with Alan. Every time you deliver, put it on the invoice, put it in, send the licensing with the images. You got to have that. You just got to.
Yeah. I even put it with my image transfers. So
yeah,
I have a file transfer. It's on there as well. I'm sorry.
It's a good idea.
No, Alan, the file transfer you mentioned, how does that work? It's on a invoice included in the files, or a terms and conditions document that you include?
It's
Your-
well, I use WeTransfer to transfer files. That's the service that I use, and they have a message section that prints in the email that below the download link, and so in that message section, it says image licensing terms, and so that's in there, and so they know when they get that and are ready to download that those are the terms they're downloading those images with. So.
Oh, nice.
And that's been really helpful. I haven't had any confusion about licensing since I've been doing that. So
When you guys deliver to homeowners, do you send like an invoice or just like terms and conditions in an email if you're delivering to like for personal use to a homeowner?
I actually give them a courtesy license if it's a courtesy, negotiated ahead of time with a client. I'll send them a courtesy license that says exactly what Alan did. Is for your personal use. You're not to share, sell, or any way distribute the image. And they're fine with that. I mean, oftentimes we'll actually do a book for the homeowner and a coffee table book. And the client likes that because, it just sits on a coffee table. But if you're doing it electronically, we specify the usage that they are entitled to. And the images are never high res. They're always JPEGs.
yeah, always JPEGs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
Okay.
the coffee table book I did.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, Shutterfly is an easy one to use, and there's a bunch of others. And you pay what, $25 for a nice book, and the linen wrapped book. That's a great. I used to use those as mailers for potential clients when I was targeting a client. If I'm going to bill $10,000, I could spend $25 to try to get the job. So I used to do that.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted and may not be used in full or in part without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.